What would you do if you overheard your husband planning your murder? Now imagine this. You are 4 months pregnant. You have no money, no family, no friends. Your mother-in-law is the mastermind. Your husband's mistress is in on it.
It's over.
And they have
I
already
have the
picked
evidence.
the date.
You're
Tuesday,
finished, Margaret,
the
and there's
Mountain
nothing
Road.
you can do to stop
Brake
me.
failure. That was supposed to be the end of Meredith's story. A tragic accident. A grieving widower. Case closed. But here is what they did not know.
No, let
She
me
was
go.
recording
This isn't
everything.
justice.
She was carrying
I
not
can't
one
breathe. I
baby,
didn't
but
do
3.
anything.
And her
Clear the area
grandfather,
now.
the man
Move
they
along.
convinced her to abandon, had left her a fortune they knew nothing about. They thought she was weak because she was quiet. They thought she was stupid because she was kind. They thought throwing her away would break her. Instead, it set her free. This story has more twists than you can imagine. Betrayal, survival, and a revenge so perfectly executed you will not see it coming. Stay until the end. Trust me. You do not want to miss what happens next. If stories about women who fight back give you chills, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment telling me, what would you do if you discovered your family was plotting against you? And share this with someone who needs to know that the quiet ones are always the most dangerous. Let us begin. The moment I heard my mother-in-law say brake failure on that mountain road, I stopped breathing. I was standing in the hallway of the Holloway mansion, my hand pressed against the wall for support, my other hand instinctively covering my stomach. I did not know yet that 3 hearts were beating inside me, 3 tiny lives that they wanted to erase along with mine. But here is what they did not know. I was recording everything on my phone, and what I discovered next would make murder look like the least of their sins. My name is Meredith Collins Holloway. Most people call me Mary, though there had been nothing merry about my life for the past 4 years. I was 32 years old, a former nurse who gave up her career for marriage, and I was trapped in a nightmare disguised as a fairy tale. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not the very beginning, but the beginning of the end. The morning that started like every other morning in my prison with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. 5:30 in the morning. The sky outside was still dark, but I was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Grant liked his eggs poached, his coffee black, his orange juice fresh squeezed. Vivian, my mother-in-law, had a list of requirements that changed depending on her mood and her desire to find fault with everything I did. I cracked eggs into the pot of simmering water, watching the whites curl around the yolks. My hands were steady from years of practice, but my heart was not. It had not been steady for a long time. The click of heels on tile announced Vivian's arrival before I saw her. She swept into the kitchen like a queen inspecting her servants. Her silver hair perfectly styled, her silk robe probably worth more than my entire wardrobe had been before I married Grant. "Scrambled eggs again," she said, peering into the pot with obvious disdain. "Grant prefers poached, but I suppose you would not know that. You have only been married 4 years." "They are poached," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I forced a smile. "But you are right, I will remake them if they are not perfect." She sniffed. "See that you do." Rosa Martinez, our housekeeper, passed behind Vivian with a basket of laundry. She was 55 years old with kind eyes and a sharp wit that she had learned to hide around the Holloways. As she walked by me, she whispered so softly only I could hear, "Senora, even Jesus himself could not poach eggs good enough for that woman." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. Rosa was the only person in this house who treated me like a human being, the only one who saw me. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags years earlier. When someone criticizes everything you do, it is not about improvement. It is about control. If you can never be good enough, the problem is not you. The problem is them. But I did not see it then. Or maybe I did see it and chose to ignore it because the alternative was too terrifying. Where would I go? What would I do? Grant had systematically cut me off from everyone I had ever known. My parents died when I was 23, a car accident that left me orphaned and vulnerable. My grandfather, the only family I had left, had been pushed away by Grant's constant suggestions that the old man was senile, that visiting him was a waste of time. I had no money of my own, no car in my name, no friends who had not been deemed inappropriate by my husband. I was completely dependent, completely isolated, completely trapped. That morning, after Vivian finished her inspection and declared the breakfast barely adequate, I cleaned up the kitchen and got ready for my doctor's appointment. I had been feeling sick for weeks, more than usual. The nausea hit me at odd times, and I was exhausted no matter how much I slept. I suspected I might be pregnant. The thought filled me with complicated emotions. Part of me desperately wanted a baby, someone to love who would love me back unconditionally. But another part of me, the part that had been growing stronger lately, whispered that bringing a child into this household would be cruel. Grant drove me to the appointment himself. He did that sometimes, not out of love or concern, but to maintain the appearance of a devoted husband. The doctor's office was in a nice part of town, affiliated with the hospital where I used to work before Grant convinced me to quit. "I will wait in the car," he said without looking up from his phone. He was smiling at something on the screen, his thumbs moving quickly. I nodded and went inside alone. Dr. William Patterson was a kind man in his 50s with a gentle demeanor and decades of experience. He had been my physician for the past 3 years, and he was one of the few people who seemed to genuinely care about my well-being. "Meredith," he said after the initial examination, "I need you to sit down. Your HCG levels are unusual." My heart stuttered. "Is something wrong?" He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that came before big news. "Let us do an ultrasound and take a look." I lay on the examination table, my shirt pulled up, the cold gel making me shiver. Dr. Patterson moved the wand across my stomach, his eyes fixed on the monitor. Then he stopped. His eyebrows rose. "Well," he said slowly, "this explains the unusual levels." He turned the monitor so I could see it. At first, I did not understand what I was looking at. Then I saw them. One, two, three. Three distinct shapes. Three heartbeats flickering on the screen. "Triplets," Dr. Patterson said. "You are carrying triplets, Meredith." The world tilted. I gripped the edges of the examination table, trying to process what he was telling me. Three babies. Not one. Three. "This is a high-risk pregnancy," he continued. "You will need extra monitoring, possibly bed rest, and definitely reduced stress. I want to see you every 2 weeks, and we will need to discuss your birth plan." I stared at the screen, at those three tiny heartbeats, and felt tears streaming down my face. Joy, yes, but also fear. How would Vivian react? How would Grant? "Can I wait to tell my husband?" I heard myself say. "Just until I figure out how." Dr. Patterson studied me for a long moment. His eyes were knowing, concerned. "Of course," he said, "medical confidentiality. But Meredith, if there is anything you need to tell me, anything at all, I am here." I shook my head and wiped my tears. "I am fine. I am just overwhelmed." But I was not fine. And something deep inside me, some instinct I could not explain, told me to keep this secret, to wait, to be careful. Trust your gut. I cannot explain why, but something told me not to share this news. Your instincts are data your conscious mind has not processed yet. Listen to them. That instinct saved my life. When I got back to the car, Grant was still on his phone. He glanced up briefly. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. "Just routine." He nodded and started the car, already forgetting about me. I watched his profile as he drove. This man I had married, this man I had thought I loved. His jaw was tight, his eyes distant. He had been acting strange for months now. Secretive phone calls, late nights at the office, a smile that only appeared when he was looking at his screen. That night, I tried to connect with him. We sat at the dinner table, Vivian at the head as always, Grant across from me. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of silverware on china. "Grant," I said carefully, "I was thinking maybe we could take a vacation. Just us, before things get busy with work." He did not look up from his phone. He was smiling at something, his thumbs moving quickly. "Cannot," he said. "Busy quarter? Ask mother to take you shopping or something." His phone buzzed and he angled it away from me, but not fast enough. I saw the screen. Heart emojis. A woman's name. The letter S. My stomach dropped. I looked at Vivian, but she was focused on her plate, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. She knew. She knew about the affair, and she approved. I said nothing. I swallowed my pain and finished my dinner and went to bed alone, while my husband stayed up late texting another woman. That was who I had become. A woman who saw the truth and said nothing. A woman so beaten down that she accepted infidelity as just another cross to bear. But the triplets changed everything. 3 innocent lives growing inside me. 3 reasons to finally wake up and see my situation for what it was. I was not just trapped anymore. I was in danger. 2 weeks after finding out about the triplets, I decided to follow Vivian. I know it sounds paranoid, maybe it was, but something had shifted in me since seeing those 3 heartbeats on the monitor. A protective instinct that made me hyper-aware of everything happening around me, and what I was noticing made my skin crawl. Vivian had been leaving the house every Tuesday afternoon. She would get dressed up, makeup perfect, and refuse to say where she was going. Grant had grown increasingly secretive, spending hours in his study with the door locked. They would have whispered conversations that stopped the moment I entered a room. Something was brewing, something dark, and I needed to know what it was. That Tuesday, I told Rosa I was going for a walk and slipped out the side door. Vivian's car was already pulling out of the driveway. I followed in the household's second vehicle, a modest sedan that Grant let me use for grocery runs. She drove to a restaurant downtown, an upscale place with white tablecloths and a waiting list. I parked across the street and watched her go inside. After a few minutes, I followed, telling the hostess I was looking for someone. I spotted Vivian immediately. She was at a corner table, but she was not alone. Across from her sat a young woman, probably late 20s, with long brown hair and an expensive leather jacket. They were laughing, their heads close together, looking at what appeared to be magazines. Wedding magazines. My blood went cold. I ducked behind a pillar and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it, but I managed to open the voice recorder app. Then I moved closer, close enough to hear their conversation. The young woman spoke first. Her voice was confident, pleased. I still cannot believe Grant married her. She is so plain. Vivian laughed that tinkling society laugh she used at charity events. Temporary insanity, darling. He needed someone humble for the campaign donors, but you were always the one. Once she is out of the picture. Out of the picture? The young woman's voice held a note of curiosity. Divorce, sweetheart. Vivian patted her hand. What did you think I meant? They both laughed. The young woman, I would later learn her name was Sienna Blake, shook her head. I have waited so long for this. Grant was my first love, you know. We dated all through college. When he married her, I thought I had lost him forever. You never lost him. Vivian's voice was warm, motherly. He was always meant to be with you. Someone from a proper family, with proper breeding. Not some orphan nurse with nothing to offer. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from making a sound. My other hand trembled as I held the phone, recording every word. They spent the next 20 minutes discussing plans. Sienna would be patient. Grant would file for divorce. By summer, they would have a beautiful wedding, and Sienna would take her rightful place as Mrs. Grant Holloway. Vivian is on our side, Sienna said happily. That makes everything so much easier. Our side. Like I was the enemy. Like I was an obstacle to be removed. I left before they noticed me, driving home in a daze. My husband was having an affair. My mother-in-law was not just approving, but actively orchestrating it. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. But I did not know the worst part yet. That revelation came 3 nights later. I could not sleep. The pregnancy was making me nauseous, and my mind would not stop spinning with what I had discovered. Around 2 in the morning, I went downstairs to get some water. As I reached the bottom of the staircase, I heard voices coming from Vivian's study. Low, serious voices. I should have announced myself. I should have walked right in. But something made me stop, made me press my back against the wall and listen. The life insurance will set us up nicely. That was Grant's voice, but not the Grant I knew. This voice was cold, calculating, completely devoid of the charm he usually wore like a mask. Once she is gone, we split it 3 ways. You get your share, mother. Sienna gets hers, and I keep the rest. My legs almost gave out. Life insurance. Gone. And you are absolutely sure this will look like an accident? Sienna's voice now, worried but excited. I do not want to go to prison for this. My heart stopped. Sienna was in there too. The mistress, the mother-in-law, and my husband, all plotting together. Vivian's laugh was like ice. Oh, please, dear, I have thought of everything. Meredith has no family who cares about her. We made sure of that. Her medical records show anxiety and depression. And the brakes on her car failing during her grocery run? These things happen. Tragic, really. A young woman all alone losing control on that dangerous hill road. I clasped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. They were planning to murder me. Actually murder me and make it look like an accident. Grant spoke again, and I heard absolutely no emotion in his voice. We do it next week. Tuesday. She always goes grocery shopping alone on Tuesday afternoons. That gives us enough time to prepare everything. I ran upstairs as quietly as I could, locked myself in the guest bathroom, and threw up. Not from morning sickness this time, from pure terror. These people, this family I had tried so hard to please for 4 years, were planning my murder. And they did not know I was pregnant. They did not know about the triplets. 3 innocent lives that would die with me if I did not do something. I sat on that bathroom floor for an hour, shaking, trying to figure out what to do. Call the police? With what proof? A recording that might not be admissible. Grant's family had connections everywhere. His uncle was a judge. His cousin worked in the district attorney's office. Run away? With no money, no job, no support system? Where would I go? If you are in a situation like mine, document everything. Dates, times exact words. Store copies somewhere they cannot find them. Email them to yourself. Upload to cloud storage with a password only you know. Evidence is your lifeline. I pulled out my phone and did exactly that. I emailed the recording from the restaurant to a new email address I created on the spot. I typed out everything I had just heard, with dates and times. I uploaded it all to cloud storage. Then I sat in the dark, my hand on my stomach, feeling utterly alone. That is when my phone rang. Unknown number, 3:47 in the morning. I almost did not answer. Who would be calling at this hour? But something made me pick up. Is this Meredith Collins Holloway? The voice was male, professional, kind, but formal. Yes, I whispered, my voice raw from crying. My name is Marcus Webb. I am an estate attorney, and I have been trying to reach you for 6 months. It is regarding your grandfather's will. My grandfather? Henry Collins had died about 6 months ago. Grant had told me there was no inheritance, nothing to worry about. He had even convinced me not to bother with the funeral, said it would be too painful, that I should remember Grandpa as he was. I believed him. I believed everything he told me. Mrs. Holloway, the attorney continued, your grandfather left you everything, his entire estate. But there are conditions we need to discuss immediately. Can you come to my office first thing tomorrow morning? I looked at the bathroom door, imagining Grant sleeping peacefully in our bed, dreaming about spending my life insurance money. Yes, I said, I will be there. I wrote down the address with shaking hands. Then I sat in that bathroom until dawn, watching the sky lighten through the small window, feeling something shift inside me. For 4 years, I had been the perfect victim. Quiet, obedient, accepting. But they had made a mistake. They had threatened not just me, but my babies. My 3 innocent babies who had never asked for any of this. Something woke up in me that night, something fierce and protective and absolutely ruthless. They wanted me dead. They had no idea who I was about to become. Marcus Webb's office was not what I expected. I had imagined something like the law firms Grant dealt with. All glass and chrome, intimidating receptionists, the smell of money and power. Instead, I found myself in a modest building on the edge of downtown, with worn carpet and fluorescent lighting, and a secretary who offered me coffee from a regular pot, not an espresso machine. Marcus himself was a surprise too. Late 30s, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it did not smell easily but meant it when it did. He wore a simple suit, no designer labels, and when he shook my hand, his grip was firm, but not aggressive. Mrs. Holloway, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Thank you for coming. I know this must seem strange. You said my grandfather left me everything. I sat down, my hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. My husband told me there was no inheritance. Marcus's expression shifted. Something flickered in his eyes. Yes, he said carefully. Your husband told me the same thing. He said you were not interested in the inheritance, that you wanted it all donated to charity. He had me sign papers to that effect. I never said that. The words came out sharp, defensive. I did not even know my grandfather had anything to leave. Marcus studied me for a long moment. His eyes dropped to my wrists, where the long sleeves of my cardigan had ridden up to reveal the fading bruise from where Grant had grabbed me last week. I quickly pulled the fabric down, but I knew he had seen. "Mrs. Holloway," he said slowly, "are you safe at home?" The question was so unexpected, so direct, that I felt tears spring to my eyes. No one had asked me that in 4 years. No one had looked at me closely enough to even consider the question. I could lie. I'd gotten good at lying, at hiding, at pretending everything was fine. But something about Marcus Webb, about this small, honest office, about the concern in his eyes made me tell the truth. "No," I whispered, "I am not safe." And then I told him everything. The abuse that had started subtle and grown worse. The isolation. The affair. And finally what I had heard last night. The plan to kill me. The brake lines. The mountain road. I showed him the recordings on my phone. He listened without interrupting, his face growing grimmer with each revelation. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "Holy God," he said. "This is attempted murder conspiracy. We need to go to the police. His uncle is Judge Robertson." The words tasted bitter. "His cousin works in the DA's office. They will bury it before I can blink. I need to get out first, get somewhere safe, and then maybe I can figure out how to fight them." Marcus nodded slowly. "Your grandfather suspected something like this." "What?" "Not the murder part," Marcus clarified. "But he did not trust Grant. He saw through him from the very beginning. That is why the will has conditions." He pulled out a thick folder and opened it on his desk. Inside were documents, letters, financial statements. The scope of it made my head spin. "Your grandfather was worth $8 million when he died," Marcus said. "He built his business from nothing after the war. Hardware stores, then real estate, then investments. He was not flashy about it. Lived in the same small house for 40 years. But he was smart, and he was careful." "I never knew." My voice cracked. "Grant said he was senile, said visiting him was a waste of time. I should have gone anyway. I should have. Your grandfather understood." Marcus's voice softened. "He knew Grant was isolating you. That is why he set up the will the way he did." He explained the conditions. "The $8 million was held in trust. I could only access it if I was living independently from Grant for 90 days. If I died while still married to Grant, everything went to charity. Grant would get nothing. He wanted to make sure Grant could not profit from your death," Marcus said. "But there is another provision. A secret one." He pulled out a handwritten letter, yellowed with age. "Your grandfather wrote this to me personally. He said, if my granddaughter ever needs to run, give her wings. He authorized me to release emergency funds immediately if I determined you were in genuine danger." I stared at the letter, at my grandfather's familiar handwriting, and felt tears streaming down my face. He had protected me. Even from beyond the grave, he had been looking out for me. "How much?" I managed to ask. "Enough to get you somewhere safe. Enough to hire lawyers, investigators, whatever you need." Marcus paused, enough to fight back. For the first time in 4 years, I felt something other than fear. I felt hope. Over the next few days, we made a plan. I would continue acting normal at home, the obedient wife, the doormat. Meanwhile, I would secretly document everything, gather evidence, prepare for my escape. Saturday was the day they planned to kill me. I was supposed to drive to the farmer's market alone, down the mountain road where my brakes would mysteriously fail. Instead, I was going to disappear. Rosa helped without knowing the full picture. She thought I was planning a surprise for Grant, and she was happy to cover for me while I made trips to the bank, to a storage unit, to Marcus's office. I copied every financial document I could find. I photographed Grant's computer screen when he left it unlocked, capturing emails that detailed his company's troubles. I backed up everything to the cloud. And I waited. The night before my planned murder, Grant came home late. He had been drinking. His eyes were red, his movements sloppy. He found me in the kitchen, making myself tea. "Meredith," he said, leaning against the door frame. His voice had that edge it got when he was about to be cruel. You know I love you, right? I kept my expression neutral. Of course. Everything I do for us, for our family. I turned to face him. He was handsome still, even after everything. The face I had fallen in love with, the face that now haunted my nightmares. I know, I said. He crossed the room and cupped my face in his hands. His grip was too tight, just on the edge of painful. That was how he touched me now. Always a reminder of his power. You are my wife, he said, forever, till death do us part. The words sounded like a threat because they were. I smiled and kissed his cheek and told him I was tired and went to bed. I lay awake all night, listening to his breathing, thinking about how easily I could have become a statistic, a tragic accident, a grieving widower. But they had underestimated me. They had seen the quiet, obedient Mary and assumed that was all there was. They did not know about the woman underneath, the woman who had survived losing her parents, losing her grandfather, losing herself. That woman was done being a victim. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. Perfect weather for a drive down a mountain road. Perfect weather for an accident. I got dressed, kissed Grant goodbye, told Vivian I would bring back fresh strawberries from the market. Instead, I drove to the small apartment Marcus had rented for me across town. I let myself in with the key he had given me. I stood in the middle of the bare living room, looking at the walls that needed painting and the carpet that had seen better days. And I breathed. I did it, I whispered to myself, to the triplets inside me. I actually did it. My phone rang. It was Marcus. The police have been contacted with your evidence. Stay put. You are safe now. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, and cried. Relief, fear, exhaustion, all of it pouring out of me. For the first time in 4 years, I was free. Or so I thought. 24 hours. That is how long my freedom lasted. I was sleeping on the mattress Marcus had delivered to the apartment, the first real sleep I had gotten in weeks, when the pounding started. Loud, insistent, terrifying. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, but then I heard his voice. Meredith, it is Marcus. Open up, we have a problem. He looked terrible. His face was pale, his tie loosened, his usual composure completely shattered. He pushed past me into the apartment and started pacing. The police did not arrest Grant, he said. They did not even bring him in for questioning. What? But the recordings, the evidence, his family lawyer got ahead of it. He is claiming the recordings were manipulated, doctored. He is filing a motion to suppress them. That is insane. They are real. I was there, I know. Marcus ran his hand through his hair. But that is not the worst part. He pulled out his phone and showed me a news clip. My blood turned to ice as I watched. Grant was on television. He was crying, his face a mask of anguish. The perfect picture of a worried husband. Behind him stood Vivian, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. My wife is missing, Grant said into the microphone. Meredith has not been well. She stopped taking her medication. She is pregnant and confused. If anyone has seen her, please call this number. I just want my wife back safe. The reporter's voice over continued. Police are treating this as a missing person case. Mrs. Holloway has a history of mental health issues, including anxiety and depression. Her family is asking anyone with information to come forward. I could not breathe. They had flipped the narrative. I was not the victim. I was the crazy wife who had wandered off. There is more, Marcus said grimly. Vivian contacted your psychiatrist, the one Grant made you see for anxiety. She got records showing you were prescribed medication. Records that Grant controlled. She has a mental health expert on the news right now saying you show signs of postpartum psychosis. I am not even postpartum, I said, my voice rising. I am still pregnant. They do not care about facts. They care about perception. And right now, the perception is that you are an unstable pregnant woman who needs to be found and returned to her loving husband. I sank onto the mattress, my hands on my stomach. The triplets were moving, tiny flutters that reminded me why I was fighting. What do we do? Marcus sat down across from me. His eyes were honest, troubled. I do not know, he admitted. They have more money, more lawyers, more connections. The police want to do a wellness check. Bring you back to Grant. Social media is already destroying you. He showed me his phone again, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. My face was everywhere with comments calling me crazy, unstable, a danger to my unborn child. People I had never met were diagnosing me, judging me, condemning me. They are going to take my babies, I whispered. They are going to commit me and take my babies, and no one will believe me. Marcus did not have an answer for that. The next few days were a nightmare. I could not leave the apartment for fear of being recognized. I watched the news obsessively, seeing my own face staring back at me with the word missing stamped across it. I watched Grant give interview after interview, his performance flawless, his grief convincing. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe I was the monster they said I was. When they try to make you look crazy, your sanity becomes your greatest weapon. Keep your composure. Document their lies. The truth does not need to scream. It just needs to survive long enough to be heard. I held on to that thought like a lifeline. I was not crazy. I had recordings. I had evidence. I had Marcus, who believed me. But was that enough? One night I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. The apartment was on the third floor. The window was large. The drop would be quick. The thought slithered into my mind before I could stop it. It would be easy. All the pain would stop. Grant would not get the insurance money because I was living separately now. The triplets would never have to know this ugly world. Then I felt it. A kick. Then another. Then a third. 3 tiny lives fighting their way into existence. 3 reasons to keep going. I pressed my hand against my stomach and cried, "I know," I whispered. "I know. Mommy will not give up. I promise." The next morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated before opening the message. What fresh hell was this going to be? But the message was not from Grant or Vivian or the police. It was from someone I never expected. "I know what they are planning. I did not know about the murder. I swear I did not. Can we meet? Sienna." 2 in the morning, I woke to pain, not the usual pregnancy discomfort, not the aching back or the swollen ankles or the constant pressure on my bladder. This was different. This was sharp, stabbing, terrifying. Like someone had reached inside me and was squeezing my organs with an iron fist. Something was wrong, very wrong. I reached for my phone with trembling hands. The room was spinning. My vision was blurry, like looking through water. When I tried to sit up, a wave of nausea hit me so hard I nearly passed out. The phone screen was too bright. I squinted at it, trying to focus. My fingers felt clumsy, disconnected from my brain. It took 3 tries to dial the numbers. 911, what is your emergency? "I am pregnant," I gasped. The words came out in a rush, tangled together. "Triplets, 7 months. Something is wrong, please. Please help me. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Can you tell me your address?" I rattled off the address of the apartment, my voice shaking. The dispatcher's voice was steady, professional, but I could hear the urgency underneath. "An ambulance is on the way. Stay on the line with me. Can you describe what you are feeling?" "Pain," I whispered. "Everywhere. My head is pounding. I cannot see straight. And the babies, they are moving, but it feels wrong. It feels like they are scared." "How long have you been feeling this way?" "I do not know. I woke up like this. I was fine when I went to sleep. I was happy. We were supposed to win tomorrow." "Ma'am?" "Nothing. I'm sorry. Please hurry. Please." I lay on that mattress alone in the dark, feeling my baby struggle inside me. 3 tiny bodies, fighting for space, fighting for oxygen, fighting to survive. I had worked so hard to keep them safe. I had escaped a mansion full of people who wanted me dead. I had outsmarted a conspiracy. I had found allies in the most unlikely places. And now, when victory was finally in sight, my own body was betraying us. I pressed both hands against my stomach, trying to comfort them, trying to let them know their mother was here, that she would not give up, that she would never give up. "Hold on," I whispered. "Please hold on. Mommy needs you to fight. Just a little longer. Help is coming." But even as I said the words, I felt something wet between my legs. I reached down with shaking fingers and brought them up to my face. Blood. Oh God. Oh God, no. "Ma'am, Ma'am, are you still there? There is blood, I said, my voice cracking. There is so much blood. The ambulance is 2 minutes away. I need you to stay calm. Do not try to move. Keep breathing. Deep breaths. Can you do that for me? I tried, I really tried, but the pain was getting worse, not better, and the blood was not stopping. The last thing I remember before the paramedics arrived was looking up at the ceiling of that bare apartment with its water stains and peeling paint and thinking, this cannot be how it ends. Not like this, not alone, not in the dark. Please, I prayed to whatever was listening, not my babies. Take me if you have to, but not my babies. The door crashed open. Bright lights, loud voices, hands lifting me onto a stretcher. Blood pressure is through the roof, one of them said. 180 over 120. Possible preeclampsia. Maybe HELP syndrome. We need to move now. Is she going to be okay? Another voice, younger, worried. I do not know. Get her in the rig. Call ahead to the hospital. Tell them we have a high-risk triplet pregnancy in crisis. They need to prep an OR. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and jolting motion and someone squeezing my hand. I kept fading in and out, consciousness slipping away like water through my fingers. Stay with me, the paramedic said. His face swam above me. Kind eyes, worried mouth. What is your name? Meredith, I managed. Mary. Okay, Mary, I am going to be honest with you. You are very sick. But we are going to get you to the hospital and they are going to take care of you. I need you to keep fighting. Can you do that? I nodded, or I think I nodded. Everything was getting fuzzy. Tell me about your babies, he said. Are they boys or girls? 2 boys. I forced the words out. 1 girl. You got names picked out? Henry, after my grandfather, William, and Hope. Those are beautiful names. He squeezed my hand again. You are going to hold them soon, Mary. You are going to hold all 3 of them. I need you to believe that. I tried to believe it. I really did. The hospital was chaos. They wheeled me through bright corridors, past nurses and doctors and machines beeping and people shouting. I caught fragments of conversation. Words like critical and emergency and prep the OR and where is the neonatologist? Mrs. Holloway? A face appeared above me. A woman middle-aged with tired eyes and a calm voice. I am Dr. Sarah Bennett. I am going to be performing your surgery. Surgery? Your blood pressure is dangerously high. The baby's in distress. We need to do an emergency cesarean section right now. Right now, but I am only 7 months. They are too early. They are not ready. If we wait, we could lose all of them. Dr. Bennett's voice was gentle but firm. Including you. I know this is terrifying, but I need you to trust me. We are going to do everything we can to save your babies. There was no time to think. No time to call Marcus or Rosa or anyone. They were already prepping me for surgery, already wheeling me toward the operating room. I was alone, 7 months pregnant with triplets, about to undergo emergency surgery, and completely alone. Then it got worse. The doors at the end of the hallway burst open, a man's voice shouting, "That is my wife. Those are my children. Let me in. I have rights. I am her husband." I knew that voice. I would know it anywhere. Grant. No, no, no. No, no. This was not happening. This could not be happening. Sir, you need to calm down. Security was trying to stop him, but he pushed past them. Do not tell me to calm down. That is my wife in there. She is having my babies. I have a legal right to be present. His face appeared at the end of the corridor. Our eyes met. For one horrible second, I saw everything in his expression. The desperation, the calculation, the fury. He did not look like a worried husband. He looked like a predator who had cornered his prey. Meredith, his voice changed, became softer, concerned. Honey, I have been so worried. Come home. Let me take care of you. Do not let him in, I begged Dr. Bennett. My voice came out as a ragged whisper. Please, he tried to kill me. He planned to murder me. Do not let him near my babies. Dr. Bennett's eyes widened. She looked at Grant, then back at me, processing what I had just said. Get him out of here, she ordered security. Now, call the police. You cannot do this. Grant's voice rose to a shout as they grabbed his arms. Those are my children. I have rights. Meredith, tell them I am your husband. I turned my face away. I could not look at him, could not see the man who had planned to cut my brake lines, who had calculated exactly how much money my death would bring him, who had sat with his mother and his mistress and discussed my murder like they were planning a dinner party. This is not over, Grant screamed as they dragged him away. Do you hear me, Meredith? This is not over. Those babies are mine. You cannot keep them from me. His voice faded as security pulled him down the corridor, but I could still hear him shouting. Even through the doors of the operating room, even through the drugs they were pumping into my IV, I could hear him. The man who had planned my murder was feet away from my operating table, and there was nothing I could do about it. Stay calm, Dr. Bennett said, though her own voice was tense. Focus on breathing. We are going to get these babies out safely. I need you to stay with me. The surgery began. I felt pressure, tugging, movement inside me that I could not control. The anesthesia made everything dreamlike, distant, like watching it happen to someone else. I heard Dr. Bennett's voice, giving instructions, heard the beeping of machines, heard the clatter of instruments, and then I heard something else. A sound that made my heart stop, silence. Why was there no crying? First baby is out, someone announced. A boy. Silence. He is not breathing. Get the resuscitation team. No, 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 not my baby. Please, not my baby. I tried to move, tried to see, but hands held me down. Stay still, Mrs. Holloway. Let them work. An eternity passed, seconds that felt like hours. I stared at the ceiling, tears streaming down my face, praying harder than I had ever prayed in my life. Then finally a wail, thin and reedy and weak, but a wail. First baby is breathing. He is stable. Moving him to the warming table. Thank God. Thank God. Second baby is out. Another boy. He is crying. Good lung function. He is okay. 2 down, 1 to go. My little girl, my hope. The third baby came out. I waited for the cry, waited for the sound of life, but there was only silence. She is not responding, someone said. No spontaneous respiration. Get the NICU team now. We need to intubate. I watched through a haze of drugs and terror as they rushed my daughter away. She was so small, so impossibly small, and so still, like a doll, like something that had never been alive at all. My baby, I whimpered, please. Please save my baby. They are doing everything they can. Dr. Bennett's face swam above me. You need to rest now, Meredith. Let them work. But I could not rest. How could I rest when my daughter was dying? They closed me up. They wheeled me to recovery. They gave me more drugs for the pain. But nothing could touch the agony in my heart. I lay in that hospital bed, arms empty, heart shattered. 2 sons in the NICU, stable but critical. 1 daughter fighting for her life. And outside, somewhere in the hospital, Grant was probably already on the phone with his lawyers, figuring out how to spin this, how to use this, how to take my children away from me. The DA called Marcus with devastating news. Grant's lawyers had filed an emergency motion to delay the arrest warrant. Something about prosecutorial misconduct. Something about illegally obtained evidence. The arrest that was supposed to happen tomorrow morning was now postponed indefinitely. Everything was falling apart. I lay in the dark, listening to the beeping of machines, watching the minutes tick by on the clock. Every few hours, a nurse would come in to check my vitals. They were always gentle, always kind, but they would not tell me anything about my daughter. She is still fighting, they would say. The doctors are with her. What does that mean? I would ask. Is she going to be okay? And they would just squeeze my hand and say they would let me know as soon as there was news. When you think you cannot take any more, remember this. You have survived 100% of your worst days. You are still here. That is not luck. That is strength you did not know you had. I held on to those words like a lifeline. Repeated them to myself over and over. 100%. I had survived everything so far. My parents dying, Grant's abuse, the isolation, the discovery, the escape, the public humiliation. I had survived all of it. I could survive this too. I had to. At 4 in the morning, the door opened. I braced myself for more bad news. for the words no mother should ever have to hear, for the end of everything. But the nurse who came in was smiling. Her face was tired but kind, and she was smiling. "Mrs. Holloway, your daughter. She is breathing." I burst into tears. "She is okay? She is fighting." The nurse came to my bedside and took my hand. She had a rough few hours. They had to put her on a ventilator for a while. But she started breathing on her own about 20 minutes ago. Her vitals are stabilizing. She is a fighter, that one. I sobbed so hard I could not speak. Relief and joy and exhaustion and terror all mixed together into something I could not name. "Can I see them?" I managed. "Please, I need to see my babies." The nurse hesitated. "You are still recovering from major surgery? Dr. Bennett wants you to rest, please." I looked at her, letting her see everything in my eyes. The fear, the love, the desperation. I need to see them. I need to know they are real. She studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Let me get a wheelchair." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the NICU, surrounded by incubators and monitors and the soft sounds of babies fighting to live. Henry was in the first incubator. He was small but perfect. His tiny fists clenched, his face scrunched up in sleep. A feeding tube ran to his nose, and wires monitored his every heartbeat, but he looked peaceful, content, like he had already decided that the world was an okay place to be. William was in the second incubator. He was bigger than Henry, more active. Even in his sleep, his legs kicked and his arms moved. A fighter from day one. And then there was Hope. She was so tiny, smaller than her brothers by far. Her skin was almost translucent, and I could see the blue veins underneath. A ventilator mask covered most of her face, even though she was breathing on her own now. Wires and tubes connected her to half a dozen machines. But she was alive. I reached through the hole in the incubator and touched her hand with one finger. Her fingers were so small they could not even wrap around mine. But when I touched her, her hand moved. Just a tiny bit. Just enough to let me know she was there. "Hope," I whispered. "That is your name. Hope. Because that is what you are. You are my hope. You are my reason to keep fighting. And I need you to keep fighting too. Can you do that for me, baby girl? Can you be strong just a little longer?" Her hand moved again, and I could have sworn in that moment that she heard me. "We are going to be okay," I told her. I told all three of them. I do not know how yet. I do not know what is going to happen with your father or the lawyers or any of it. But I know one thing for sure. I am never going to let anyone hurt you. Not ever. You are my miracles. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how loved you are. I sat there until the sun came up, watching my babies breathe. And for the first time in months, I felt something like peace. They were alive. All three of them. Everything else we could figure out. 2 months later, I brought my babies home. Not to the Holloway mansion with its marble floors and golden cages and the woman who had tried to kill me. Not to the sad little apartment with its peeling paint and mattress on the floor. To a real home. A small house on a quiet street in a neighborhood where children played in the yards and neighbors waved when you drove by. I bought it with my grandfather's money. The first purchase I had made entirely on my own in 5 years. When I signed the papers, my hand shook so badly the signature looked like a child's scribble. But the real estate agent just smiled and said, "Congratulations." And no one asked me if my husband approved. Because I did not have a husband anymore. Not really. Grant was out on bail, awaiting trial, prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me or the children. The restraining order was the first legal document I had ever filed without his permission. It felt like freedom. Henry, William, and Hope came home on a Tuesday, the same day of the week that I was supposed to die on that mountain road, the same day of the week that Vivian used to meet with the Sienna to plan my replacement. I chose it on purpose, reclaiming it, turning it into something beautiful instead of something terrible. They had spent 6 weeks in the NICU, growing stronger every day. Henry was the first to be discharged. He had gained weight quickly, his lungs strong, his appetite healthy. The nurses called him their little champion. William was next. He had taken a few days longer, struggling with his temperature regulation. But once he figured it out, there was no stopping him. Even at 6 weeks old, he was already trying to roll over, already reaching for things, already impatient to see more of the world. Hope was last. my little fighter. She had spent 2 weeks on the ventilator before her lungs were strong enough to work on their own. She had battled jaundice and anemia and a heart murmur that eventually resolved itself. Every day, the doctors found something new to worry about, and every day, hope proved them wrong. She is stubborn, Dr. Patterson told me when he came to visit. She gets that from you. I took it as a compliment. The day I brought them home, Rosa was waiting on the porch. She had refused to leave my side since the night I escaped, had been staying in a hotel near the hospital for the entire 2 months, visiting every day, bringing food and clean clothes and the kind of love I had forgotten existed. When she saw me pull into the driveway with 3 car seats in the back, she burst into tears. Mija, she said, helping me carry them inside. You did it. You really did it. We did it, I corrected her. I could not have done any of this without you. She waved off the praise, but I could see how much it meant to her. Rosa had spent years watching me suffer in that mansion, unable to do anything about it. Now she was finally able to help, and she threw herself into the role with everything she had. She moved into the guest bedroom that same day. Officially, she was the nanny, but really, she was family. The grandmother my children needed, the mother I had lost, the friend I had desperately needed for so long. The first few weeks were chaos. 3 newborns meant almost no sleep. Someone was always hungry, always crying, always needing to be changed. Rosa and I worked in shifts, trading off every few hours, catching naps when we could. But it was the good kind of chaos, the kind that meant life and love and the ordinary miracle of watching your children grow. Every smile, every coo, every tiny hand wrapped around my finger felt like a victory. I did this, I would think. I kept them safe. I brought them into the world. And then the real victories began. Marcus called me 3 weeks after I brought the babies home. His voice was different, excited in a way I had never heard from him before. Meredith, he said, you need to turn on the news. I fumbled for the remote, shifting Hope to my other arm. William was sleeping in his swing. Henry was in Rosa's arms, drinking a bottle. It was a rare moment of relative calm, and I had been enjoying it. The television flickered on to a breaking news banner. FBI raids local mansion in corruption probe. My heart stopped. The footage showed the Holloway mansion, the place I had lived for 4 years, surrounded by black SUVs and agents in tactical gear. They were carrying out boxes of evidence, leading people away in handcuffs. And there, in the center of it all, was Vivian. She was screaming at the agents, her perfect composure completely shattered. Her hair was disheveled. Her makeup was smeared. She looked like a wild animal, nothing like the poised society woman who had criticized my eggs every morning and planned my murder over tea. What is happening? I asked Marcus. Remember how Sienna said Vivian was blackmailing a city councilman? Yes. It turns out that was just the tip of the iceberg. He paused for effect. Vivian has been running a corruption ring for over 20 years. 5 politicians, 2 judges, 1 police chief. The FBI has been investigating for months. When they saw our evidence, they realized it connected to their case. Oh my God. But that is not all. Marcus's voice dropped. They found something else. Something about Grant's father. I sat down heavily on the couch, still holding Hope. Grant's father? He died in a car accident 20 years ago. That is what everyone thought. But when investigators dug deeper, they found irregularities. Brake failure on a mountain road, a life insurance payout of $2 million, and Vivian was the sole beneficiary. I could not breathe. Are you saying what I think you are saying? Vivian killed her first husband, Marcus said, the same way she planned to kill you. Brake failure, mountain road, life insurance. She has been doing this for 20 years, Meredith. You were not her first victim. You were just the one who got away. I looked at the television, at Vivian being led away in handcuffs, and felt something I did not expect. Pity, not for her. She deserved everything she was about to face. But for Grant, for the little boy who had grown up with that monster for a mother, who had watched her kill his father and then learned year by year to become just like her. It did not excuse what he had done. Nothing could excuse that. But it explained things. Helped me understand how the charming man I had married had turned into someone capable of planning his wife's murder. What happens now? I asked. Now, Marcus sounded satisfied in a way I had never heard from him. Now they go to prison. Both of them for a very, very long time. Grant was arrested that night. He had been hiding in a motel 2 towns over, watching the news, probably trying to figure out how to run. But there was nowhere to run anymore. The FBI had frozen all his accounts. His family's connections were worthless now. The judges and politicians who might have protected him were too busy trying to save themselves. I watched the footage of his arrest on my phone while I nursed William. Grant looked nothing like the man I had married. His face was haggard, his eyes wild. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn to the hospital, wrinkled and stained. When they put him in the back of the police car, he looked directly at the camera. I could not tell if he was looking for me or looking at me. But either way, I held William a little tighter and turned off the screen. It is over, I told my son. He does not get to hurt us anymore. The trial was faster than I expected. The evidence was overwhelming. Between my recordings, Sienna's documents, the FBI's investigation, and the forensic accountants who had traced 20 years of fraud and corruption, there was no way for either of them to claim innocence. Grant tried anyway. He threw his mother under the bus with everything he had, claiming she had masterminded the whole thing, that he was just following her orders, that he had never intended to actually go through with the murder. The jury did not believe him. Neither did I. Vivian did not even try to defend herself. She sat through the trial in silence, staring straight ahead, her face a mask of cold fury. When the verdict was read, she did not react at all, just stood up and let the bailiffs lead her away, like she had always known this day was coming. Maybe she had. Maybe 20 years of evil catches up with everyone eventually. Vivian Holloway was sentenced to 25 years to life for the murder of her first husband, the attempted murder of me, and enough corruption charges to fill a small book. She would be over 80 before she was eligible for parole. She would probably die in prison. Good. Grant Holloway received 15 years for a conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and embezzlement. He would be in his 50s when he got out. If he got out, the other inmates would know what he had done. Men who tried to kill their pregnant wives did not fare well in prison. I did not feel sorry for him. After the sentencing, Grant asked to see me. His lawyer passed along the request with a note that said it would help with closure, that Grant wanted to apologize, that he had things he needed to say. I should have said no. Marcus told me to say no. Rosa told me to say no. Even Sienna, who I had started talking to occasionally, told me to say no. But I said yes. I needed to see him one last time. Needed to look into the eyes of the man who had planned to kill me and my children, and know that I had won. The prison visiting room was cold and gray, painted in that institutional green that was supposed to be calming, but just made everything look sick. Grant sat on the other side of the glass, wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking 10 years older than when I had last seen him. His hands were shaking. His eyes were red. He looked broken in a way I had never seen before, not apologetic, just broken. Meredith, he said. His voice was hoarse, like he had been screaming or crying or both. Thank you for coming. I did not answer. Just looked at him. Waited. I know you probably hate me. I understand. I hate myself too. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from our dating days. He used to do it when he was nervous. I just wanted to say, I am sorry. I know that does not mean anything. I know it does not change what I did. But I needed you to know. You are right, I said. It does not mean anything. He flinched like I had slapped him. I deserved that. Yes, you did. I loved you, Meredith. He leaned forward, pressing his hand against the glass. I know you do not believe me, but I did. In the beginning, it was real. Before my mother got in my head, before the money problems, before everything fell apart, I loved you. I looked at his hand on the glass, the hand that used to hold mine, the hand that had signed my life insurance papers, the hand that would have cut my brake lines if I had not escaped. Maybe you did, I said, but you loved yourself more, and that was never going to be enough. The bays. His eyes were desperate now, pleading. Can I see them? Ever. I know I have no right to ask, but they are my children too. I want to know them. I want them to know I am not just a monster. I thought about Henry, with his serious eyes and his grandfather's name, about William, already wild and fearless at 3 months old. about Hope, my little fighter, who had survived against all odds. They were his children biologically. That was undeniable. They had his genes, his blood, his DNA, but they would never have his cruelty, his weakness, his willingness to destroy the people he claimed to love. You plan to kill them, I said. My voice was steady, calm. I had practiced this moment in my head 100 times, before they were born, before they took their first breath. You sat with your mother and your mistress and discussed murdering your own children for money. I did not know you were pregnant. His voice cracked. If I had known, I never would have. You knew I might be. You knew there was a chance, and you did not care enough to find out before you planned my death. He had no answer for that, because there was no answer. You do not get to call yourself their father, I continued. You forfeited that right when you signed their death warrant. They will know what you did. When then they are old enough, I will tell them the truth. All of it, and they will know that they survived because of me, not you. Meredith, please. I stood up. This conversation was over. How? Grant's voice cracked as I turned to leave. How did you do this? How did you destroy everything? I looked back at him one last time, at this man I had married, this man I had loved, this man who had tried to erase me from existence. You threw away a woman you thought was worthless. You tried to murder the mother of your children. And you never, not once, bothered to actually know who I was. I paused, letting the words sink in. My grandfather knew exactly who you were, though. He tested you, and you failed spectacularly. I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I never saw Grant again. 6 months after the trial, my life looked nothing like it had before. I lived in a modest house with a big backyard, perfect for 3 growing babies who were just starting to crawl. The walls were painted in soft colors that I had chosen myself. The furniture was comfortable and practical, nothing like the stiff antiques that had filled the Holloway mansion. There were toys scattered across the floor, blankets draped over the couch, burp cloths in every room. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was absolutely perfect. Rosa had officially moved in, taking over the guest bedroom and filling the house with the smell of her cooking. She sang to the babies in Spanish, teaching them songs her own grandmother had taught her. She made tamales on Sundays and insisted we all eat dinner together at the table, even when the triplets were screaming and nobody could hear themselves think. She was the grandmother my children needed, the mother I barely remembered, the friend I had desperately needed for so long. I was working again, for the first time in 5 years. Part-time at first, just a few hours a week at the local hospital where I had given birth. They needed nurses, especially experienced ones, and my credentials were still valid. The work was exhausting, but it felt good to use my brain again, to help people, to remember that I was capable of more than just surviving. But the work that really mattered happened outside the hospital. It started with one woman. Her name was Jennifer, and I met her at a support group for domestic violence survivors. She was 34, blonde, pretty in a tired sort of way. She had 2 black eyes and a split lip and a husband who had put her in the hospital 3 times in the past year. How did you get out? She asked me after the meeting. I heard your story. You escaped from a rich family. You had resources, but I do not have any of that. I have nothing. I sat down next to her. You have more than you think. I gave her my phone number, told her to call me anytime, day or night. A week later, she did. 2 in the morning, sobbing, her husband screaming in the background. I had Rosa stay with the babies, and I drove to Jennifer's apartment. I helped her pack a bag while her husband was passed out drunk in the bedroom. I took her to a shelter. I sat with her while she cried. 3 months later, she had an apartment, and a restraining order. Her husband was in jail for violating the order. She was rebuilding her life, piece by piece, and I realized that this was what I was meant to do. There is always a way out, I told the women I met at the shelter. It might not be easy, it might not be safe, but there is always a way. Document everything. Find one person you can trust. And never, ever stop fighting for yourself. Some of them listened. Some of them were not ready to hear it. I understood. I had been there too. I had stayed with Grant for 4 years, making excuses, believing things would get better, convinced that I deserved what was happening to me. Change does not happen overnight, but it happens. And sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you when you cannot believe in yourself. Marcus stopped by regularly to check on the trust documents, he said, to update me on legal matters. But really, I think he just liked playing with the triplets. They adored him. Henry would light up whenever Marcus walked through the door. William would immediately try to climb him like a jungle gym. And Hope, my serious little fighter, would study him with those big eyes until she decided he was acceptable. And then she would reach for him to be picked up. Your grandfather would be proud of you, Marcus said one evening. We were sitting on the porch watching the sunset while Rosa put the babies to bed. It was one of those rare peaceful moments, the bond I had not known existed during my marriage. You think so? I know so. He looked at me with something like admiration. Not because you won, because you stayed good while you did it. You could have become bitter. You could have become cruel, but you did not. You took everything they threw at you and turned it into something beautiful. I have not turned it into anything yet, but you will. He smiled. I can tell. You are not the kind of person who stops fighting just because the danger is over. He was right. I was already planning, already dreaming, already imagining what I could build from the ashes of my old life. Hope crawled over and pulled herself up on my leg, demanding attention. She was the smallest of the three, but the loudest, the one who refused to be ignored. I picked her up and held her close, feeling her heartbeat against my chest. This tiny person who had almost died before she was born. This miracle. Mama, she said. I froze. Marcus froze. We stared at each other, then at Hope. Did she just? Mama, Hope said again, clearer this time. She patted my face with her small hand, looking pleased with herself. Her first word, my daughter's first word, and it was my name. I burst into tears, happy tears, the happiest tears had ever cried. She is definitely your daughter, Marcus said, laughing. Knows exactly how to get what she wants. I held her tighter, breathing in her baby smell, feeling the weight of her in my arms. I love you, I whispered. I love you so much, Hope. I love all three of you, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it. There was a knock at the door. Rosa answered it, and I heard a familiar voice. Is Meredith home? My heart stuttered. I knew that voice. I had heard it planning my replacement. Heard it laughing with Vivian over wedding magazines. Heard it asking how to be sure my murder would look like an accident. Sienna. I handed Hope to Marcus and walked to the door. Sienna stood on my porch, looking nothing like the confident woman I had seen at the restaurant all those months ago. Her hair was shorter, her clothes were simpler. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of what she had done had compressed her. I'm not here to cause trouble, she said quickly. I just wanted to see that you were okay. That they were okay. I studied her for a long moment. This woman who had almost become my replacement. This woman who had helped Vivian plan my divorce without knowing she was also planning my death. This woman who had, at the very last moment, chosen to do the right thing. Her testimony at the trial had been crucial. Without her documents, without her willingness to turn against Grant and Vivian, things might have turned out very differently. She had risked everything. Her reputation, her safety, her entire future. I should hate her. Part of me wanted to hate her, but hate was too heavy to carry. I had learned that lesson the hard way. Would you like to meet them? Sienna's eyes filled with tears. Really? After everything I did? You made mistakes. I stepped back, letting her into my home. We all make mistakes, but you also helped save my life and my children's lives. That counts for something. She came into the living room hesitantly, like she was afraid I might change my mind at any second. When she saw the triplets, she stopped breathing. Oh my God, she whispered. They are beautiful. Henry was on his playmat, solemnly studying a stuffed elephant. William was trying to eat his own foot. Hope was in Marcus's arms, looking at Sienna with suspicious curiosity. This is Henry, I said, pointing to each one. William and Hope. Hope, Sienna repeated, the one who almost did not make it, the one who fought the hardest. Sienna sat down on the floor, cross-legged, at Henry's level. He looked up at her, decided she was not a threat, and went back to his elephant. William immediately crawled over and offered her a soggy cracker, which he clearly considered a high honor. I am so sorry, Sienna said, not looking at me. I am so sorry for all of it. I told myself it was just an affair, just a divorce. I told myself you would be fine, that you would move on, that Grant and I were meant to be together. I did not let myself see what was really happening. I sat down across from her. What made you change your mind? She was quiet for a long moment. When Vivian asked me to help find you, after you escaped, she said Grant would handle the rest, and I finally realized what handle meant. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I loved him, or I thought I did, but not enough to be part of murder, not enough to have innocent blood on my hands. I reached out and took her hand. It surprised us both. You made the right choice when it mattered, I said. That is what counts. I do not deserve your forgiveness. This is not forgiveness. I was not sure I would ever fully forgive her, but I could acknowledge that she had changed, that people could change, that redemption was possible. This is just acceptance. You cannot change the past, neither can I. But we can both choose what we do next. She nodded, wiping her eyes. What are you going to do next? I looked at my children, at Marcus, who had become a friend, at Rosa, who was watching from the kitchen with tears in her eyes, at Sienna, who had come here expecting rejection and found something else entirely. I'm going to help people, I said. People like me. People who think they are trapped. People who think there is no way out. Sienna did not stay long. She had her own life to rebuild, her own mistakes to atone for. But when she left, she hugged me. A real hug, tight and desperate and grateful. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me a chance to be better. I watched her drive away, then went back inside to my babies, my family, my future. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat on the porch and watched the stars. The same stars that had watched over me during the darkest moments. The stars that had witnessed my destruction and my resurrection. I thought about everything I had lost. My parents, my grandfather, my marriage, my innocence. But I also thought about everything I had gained. My children, my strength, my freedom, myself. They threw me away because they thought I was worthless. They tried to kill me because they thought I was weak. They underestimated me because I was quiet. But quiet is not the same as broken, and kind is not the same as stupid. I was about to prove that to the world. 1 year after my escape, I launched the Collins Foundation. Named after my grandfather, the man who had protected me even from beyond the grave, it was dedicated to helping women escape abusive relationships. Not just with money, though that was part of it. With resources, legal aid, safe houses, job training, counseling, everything I had needed and almost did not have. The idea had come to me in pieces over months of volunteering at shelters, meeting women like Jennifer, hearing their stories. So many of them were just like me, smart, capable, trapped by circumstances beyond their control, convinced that they deserved what was happening to them, convinced that there was no way out. But there was always a way out. I was living proof of that. I used $3 million of my grandfather's money to start the foundation. The rest I donated to existing organizations doing similar work. I did not need a fortune. I did not want a fortune. I just wanted to make sure that no woman ever felt as alone as I had felt standing in that bathroom at 3 a.m, listening to her husband plan her murder. The launch event was held at a modest venue downtown. Nothing flashy, nothing like the Holloway charity galas I used to attend, all diamonds and champagne and hollow smiles. This was different, real, meaningful. Marcus gave a speech about the legal services the foundation would provide. Rosa insisted on catering, and her tamales were the hit of the evening. The triplets, now walking and causing chaos wherever they went, were passed around among the volunteers like precious cargo. I stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. Survivors, mostly. Women I had met at the shelter, women who had escaped their own golden cages. Their faces were scarred in ways visible and invisible. But they were here. They were alive. They were free. 4 years ago, I began, and the room went silent. I was trapped in a marriage that was slowly killing me. I had no money of my own, no friends, no family I could reach. I believed I was worthless because I was told that every single day. I believed I deserved the abuse because I did not know any better. I paused, letting the silence settle. Then I discovered I was pregnant with triplets, and I discovered that my husband and mother-in-law were planning to murder me. And in that moment, I had a choice: give up or fight. The room was completely still. Even the triplets had stopped their usual chaos, as if they understood the weight of the moment. I chose to fight, not because I was brave. God knows I was terrified, but because 3 innocent lives depended on me. And because my grandfather, who I had almost lost touch with, had left me the tools to save myself. He believed in me when I did not believe in myself. I looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Not everyone has a grandfather with a secret inheritance. I know that. But everyone has something. A friend, a neighbor, a hotline to call at 3 in the morning, a single moment of courage that changes everything. The point is not how you escape. The point is that you can, that you must, that you deserve to. Hope toddled over and tugged at my dress, wanting to be picked up. I obliged, holding her on my hip as I continued. This foundation exists so that no woman has to face what I faced alone. So that no child has to grow up without their mother because someone thought her life was worth less than an insurance payout. So that the quiet ones, the kind ones, the ones who smile through their pain, know that there is another way. I held my daughter close. Living well is not just the best revenge. It is the only revenge worth having. Because when you succeed, when you thrive, when you build a life full of love and joy and purpose, they do not win. They lose. Every single day, for the rest of their lives. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was looking at my children, at Rosa crying happy tears, at Marcus beaming with pride, at the women in the audience who were nodding along, who understood exactly what I was saying because they had lived it too. And I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. The foundation grew faster than I could have imagined. Donations poured in from unexpected sources. Women I had never met reached out to volunteer. Within 6 months, we had helped over 200 women escape abusive situations. Within a year, that number had tripled. I hired staff, real staff, caseworkers and lawyers and counselors and financial advisors. We opened a second office, then a third. We started a hotline that operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every time my phone buzzed with an update, every time I heard about another woman who had gotten out, every time I saw a success story in our newsletter, I felt my grandfather smiling down at me. This is what he wanted, I realized. Not just to save me, but to give me the tools to save others. The triplets grew alongside the foundation. They turned 1, then 2, then 3. Henry was careful and thoughtful, always watching before he acted. He loved books more than toys, and his favorite game was having me read to him while his siblings played around us. William was the opposite. Wild and fearless, he climbed everything he could find. He fell down constantly, scraped his knees constantly, cried for approximately 30 seconds, and then got right back up to try again. He was going to be an athlete or an adventurer or possibly a professional daredevil. I was already dreading his teenage years. And Hope, my little fighter. She was stubborn and loud and absolutely refused to be left out of anything her brothers did. She was the first to walk, the first to talk, and definitely the first to figure out how to unlock the baby gate. She had survived being born too early, survived not breathing for those terrible minutes in the delivery room, and she was determined to make the most of every moment. They did not know about their father. Not yet. They knew they had a grandfather named Henry, after whom their brother was named. They knew Rosa, who they called Abuela. They knew Marcus, who they called Unca Mark, and who spoiled them with presents every time he visited. They did not know about the man in prison who had planned their deaths, who had signed their murder warrant before they were even born. That conversation would come someday, when they were old enough to understand, when they could process the complexity of it without being traumatized. For now, they just knew they were loved, and that was enough. Rosa helped with everything. She was there for the midnight feedings and the terrible twos and the endless questions that 3-year-olds seem to have about everything. She was there when I had to work late, when I was exhausted, when I felt like I was failing at everything. Mija, she said one night, finding me at my desk at midnight while the babies slept, the grants will wait. Your health will not. I know. I rub my eyes. I just want to do more. Help more people. Save more women. You cannot save anyone if you are dead. She took the laptop from my hands and closed it firmly. Sleep now. Save the world tomorrow. She was right. She was always right, I let her lead me to bed and tuck me in like I was one of the children. In the dark, I thought about how far I had come. From a prisoner in a mansion to a mother of three. From a victim to a survivor. From a woman who could not say no to a woman who had learned that no was the most powerful word in the English language. I was not the same person I had been 4 years ago. That Mary was gone, destroyed by the people who should have loved her. But something better had grown from the ashes. Something stronger. Something that could never be broken again. 6 years later, I received a letter from prison. The envelope was plain white, the address Emerson handwritten in familiar script. I recognized it immediately. Even after all these years, I would know Grant's handwriting anywhere. Those loops and curves had signed our marriage certificate, our mortgage papers, the forged insurance documents that were supposed to fund my death. I stood in the kitchen, the letter in my hand, unable to open it. Henry and William were at school. Hope was at her dance class, convinced at 6 years old that she was going to be a prima ballerina. Rosa was at the grocery store, stocking up for the week. I was alone. For a moment, the old fear came flooding back. The fear I thought I had conquered years ago. The fear that had lived in my chest for 4 years of marriage. That constant, low-grade terror that something bad was about to happen. It is just paper, I told myself. It cannot hurt you. But I knew that was not true. Words could hurt. Words had hurt me for years. Words like worthless and stupid and ungrateful and who would ever want you, and everything I do is because of you. Words that had torn me down piece by piece until I did not recognize myself anymore. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat down at the kitchen table. I took a deep breath. Then I opened the letter. Dear Meredith, I know you do not want to hear from me. I know I have no right to contact you after everything I did. But I am up for parole next year, and there are things I need to say before I face the board. I was a coward. I was weak. I let my mother control me my entire life, and I let that control turn me into a monster. There is no excuse for what I plan to do. No explanation that makes it acceptable. I was going to kill you, Meredith, kill you and our children for money. I have to live with that knowledge every day. Every single day for the past 6 years, I have woken up and remembered what I almost did, what I would have done if you had not been smarter than me, braver than me, stronger than me. Prison changes a person. I have had a lot of time to think about who I was and who I want to be. I am not the same man I was when I walked in here. I have had therapy. I have faced what I did. I have stopped making excuses and blaming everyone else. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I know that. What I did was unforgivable. But I am asking for a chance to know my children. Not as their father, I forfeited that right, but as someone who wants to make amends, who wants them to know that I have changed, who wants to prove, not to them, but to myself, that I am capable of being better. I understand if you say no. I would not blame you. But I had to ask, I had to try. Whatever you decide, I want you to know something. I am proud of you, Meredith Sabrin. I have heard about the foundation. I have heard about the women you have helped. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something beautiful. That takes more strength than I ever had, more strength than I knew existed. I hope the children are healthy. I hope they are happy. I hope they have the childhood I should have given them, that I stole from them with my weakness and my greed. I am sorry. I know those words mean nothing. But I am. Grant, I read the letter 3 times. Then I set it on the counter and drank my tea. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. That surprised me. 6 years ago, this letter would have sent me into a spiral. I would have doubted myself, wondered if I was being too harsh, considered giving him another chance because that was what I always did. I gave chances to people who did not deserve them. I forgave and forgave until there was nothing left of me. But I was not that woman anymore. That night, after the children were asleep, I sat down at my desk and wrote my response. Grant, I read your letter. I thought about what you said, and I have my answer. No, not because I have not forgiven you. I have, actually. Not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying that anger was too heavy. It was poisoning me from the inside. I had to let it go so I could move on, so I could be the mother my children deserve. But forgiveness does not mean access. It does not mean trust. It does not mean pretending that what you did was anything less than monstrous. Henry, William, and Hope know the truth. I told them last year when they were old enough to understand. They know that their father made terrible choices. They know that he is in prison because of those choices. They know that he planned to kill their mother and them before they were even born. They also know that I have forgiven you, that I do not hate you, that hate is too heavy to carry. When they are older, they can decide for themselves if they want to meet you. That is their choice, not mine and not yours. But right now, they are children. They are happy, they are healthy, they are loved. And I will not introduce chaos into their lives because you have decided after 6 years that you want to be part of them. You had your chance to be their father. You had it every day for the 4 years we were married. Every day you chose your mother over me. Every day you chose money over love. Every day you chose your own weakness over your children's lives. You did not want to be their father then. You wanted them dead. You do not get to change your mind now that it is convenient. You said you are proud of me. I do not need your pride. I do not need your approval. I do not need anything from you. I have built a life without you, a good life, a beautiful life, and your opinion of it means nothing to me. If you have truly changed, prove it. Not to me, not to the parole board. Prove it to yourself. Become someone worthy of forgiveness. Become someone your mother could never have made you. And then forgive yourself because I am not going to do it for you. That is your work, your journey, your responsibility. This is the last time I will respond to any communication from you. Please do not contact me or my children again. Meredith Collins. I signed it with my maiden name, the name I had taken back after the divorce, the name my grandfather had given me, the name I had almost lost in that mansion full of marble and cruelty. I sealed the envelope and set it aside to mail in the morning. Then I turned off the light and went upstairs to check on my children. Henry was sleeping with a book on his chest, as always. At 6, he was already reading at a 3rd grade level. He wanted to be a lawyer like Uncle Mark. He wanted to help people who could not help themselves. William had kicked off his covers and was sprawled across the bed like he owned it. He was going to be tall like his father, athletic, restless, but he had my heart. He cried when animals were hurt on television. He gave his lunch to kids who forgot theirs. He was going to be a good man, in spite of his genes, and Hope, my little fighter. She was curled around her stuffed elephant, the one Rosa had given her when she came home from the hospital, still her favorite after all these years. In sleep, her face was peaceful, but I knew that when she woke up, she would be ready to take on the world. She always was. 3 miracles. 3 reasons I had kept fighting when everything seemed hopeless. I kissed each of them on the forehead and went to my own room. The house was quiet. The night was peaceful. The fear that had lived in my chest for so long, that constant companion through 4 years of marriage, was finally gone. I slept better that night than I had in years. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of children laughing downstairs. Rosa was making pancakes, the kitchen filled with the smell of butter and maple syrup. The triplets were arguing about whose turn it was to pour the syrup, their voices rising in that familiar chaos that meant home. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching them. My family. Not the family I was born into, orphaned at 23 with no one left but a grandfather I almost lost touch with. Not the family I married into, poisoned at its core by a woman who had killed her own husband. This was the family I had built, the family I had fought for, the family that proved every single day that love was stronger than hate. They threw me away because they thought I was worthless. They tried to kill me because they thought I was weak. They underestimated me because I was quiet. But quiet is not the same as broken, and kind is not the same as stupid. I walked down the stairs and into the chaos. Hope ran to hug me, sticky with syrup. Henry showed me the book he was reading, something about dinosaurs. William demanded to know if we could get a puppy, which he had been demanding every day for 3 months. Maybe, I said, which made him cheer. Rosa handed me a cup of coffee and smiled. Good morning, Mia. Good morning. I sat at the table surrounded by my children, drinking coffee made by the woman who had become my mother. Outside, the sun was shining. Inside, there was laughter and love and the beautiful, ordinary chaos of a happy family. This was my revenge. Not Grant in prison, not Vivian, who had died there 2 years ago, alone and unmourned. Not the justice system finally were working in the way it was supposed to. This, this moment, this life, this proof that they had not won. I had survived the worst thing that could happen to a person. I had been betrayed by my husband, tortured by my mother-in-law, hunted by the people who should have protected me, targeted for murder by the father of my children. And here I was, alive, free, happy. If you are in a situation like mine, I want you to know something. Listen to me. Really listen. You are stronger than you think, stronger than they told you, stronger than you can possibly imagine right now, when everything seems hopeless and dark. You are worth more than they said, worth more than the insults and the criticism and the constant tearing down, worth more than being someone's punching bag, someone's scapegoat, someone's victim. And you can get out. I promise you can. It will not be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. It will not be safe. The path out is lined with thorns and broken glass. But there is always a way. Always. Even when you cannot see it. Even when you cannot imagine it. It is there. Document everything. Dates, times exact words. Evidence is your lifeline. Trust your gut. Your instincts are smarter than you know. Find one person you can trust. One person who will believe you. One person who will help you plan. And never, ever stop fighting for yourself. Because living well is not just the best revenge. It is proof that they did not win. They did not break you. They did not define you. You did. You defined yourself. You chose who you wanted to be. You rose from the ashes of everything they destroyed and built something beautiful. That is what I did, and if I can do it, so can you. I looked at my children laughing over their pancakes, at Rosa humming in the kitchen, at the sunlight streaming through the windows of my home. They tried to throw me away. Instead, they set me free. 10 years after my escape from the Holloway mansion, I stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., accepting an award for the Collins Foundation's work. The foundation had helped over 10,000 women escape abusive situations. We had opened shelters in 30 states. We had lobbied for laws that made it easier for victims to access resources. We had trained judges and lawyers and police officers to recognize the signs. We had saved lives. But the thing I was most proud of was not the numbers or the awards or the recognition. It was the 3 young people sitting in the front row, cheering louder than anyone else. Henry, 16 now, had grown into a quiet young man with serious eyes and a passion for justice. He was planning to become a lawyer like Marcus. He wanted to help people who could not help themselves. Last summer, he had interned at the foundation, sitting in on case meetings, learning how the system worked. He was going to change the world someday. I was sure of it. William, wild as ever, was talking about becoming a firefighter or a police officer or maybe a professional skateboarder, depending on the day. He was tall now, taller than me, with his father's build but my heart. He had a girlfriend who he thought I did not know about. He was captain of his soccer team. He was going to be fine, more than fine. He was going to be wonderful. And Hope, my little fighter, my miracle. She was 16 going on 30, already fierce and determined, and absolutely certain that she was going to take over the foundation someday and make it even bigger. She had her own ideas about expanding internationally, about partnering with organizations in other countries, about creating a network that spanned the globe. I had no doubt she would do it all. They knew their whole story now, the good and the ugly. They knew about their father, who had died in prison 3 years ago, a heart attack in the yard. They knew about their grandmother, whose name was never spoken in our house. They knew how close they had come to never existing at all. And they knew their mother, the woman who had survived, the woman who had fought, the woman who had turned her worst nightmare into her greatest purpose. I looked out at the crowd, at the faces of survivors and advocates and supporters and journalists and politicians. At Rosa, crying happy tears, older now, but still the strongest woman I knew. At Marcus, beaming with pride, his hair gray at the temples, still showing up every week to play chess with Henry and teach Hope about contract law. At the empty seat in the front row where my grandfather would have sat if he had lived to see this moment. Thank you, I said into the microphone. Not just for this award. Thank you for believing. Believing that every woman deserves a chance to escape. That every child deserves a mother who survives. That every quiet, kind, underestimated woman has a warrior inside her, waiting for the moment to rise. I paused, looking at my children. 20 years ago, I was a young woman in love, convinced I had found my happily ever after. 15 years ago, I was a prisoner in my own home, slowly being erased. 10 years ago, I was hiding in a bare apartment, pregnant and terrified, with 3 heartbeats inside me and a murder plot outside my door. And today I am standing here, alive, free, surrounded by love. They tried to throw me away. They tried to kill me. They tried to erase me from existence and never face the consequences. Instead, they set me free. The applause washed over me like a wave, but I barely heard it. I was looking at Henry, William, and Hope, at the 3 heartbeats that had given me the courage to save myself. The 3 miracles who had made everything worth it. Living well is not just the best revenge, I said, my voice strong and clear. It is the only revenge that matters. Because every day that you wake up happy, every day that you look in the mirror and see someone worth loving, every day that you build something beautiful from the ashes of what they destroyed, you prove them wrong, you win, they lose. And that is a victory that lasts forever. I stepped back from the podium, the applause thundered on, and I walked off that stage and straight into the arms of my older children. Mom, Hope whispered, hugging me tight. That was amazing. I held all 3 of them close, these young people who had once been tiny heartbeats on a monitor, fighting for survival before they even took their first breath. I love you, I said. I love all 3 of you, and I am so proud of who you are becoming. We love you too, Mom, Henry said. Even when you embarrass us with your speeches, William added, grinning. I laughed, and for a moment standing there in that ballroom in Washington, D.C., surrounded by my children and my chosen family and 10,000 stories of survival, I felt my grandfather's presence. Well done, I imagined him saying. Well done, my girl. I had taken everything he gave me and built something beautiful, something lasting, something that would help women escape their own golden cages for generations to come. This was his legacy. This was my legacy. And it was only the beginning. The 3 miracles who proved that love always wins stood with me, their futures bright and unlimited, their hearts full of the unconditional love I had fought so hard to give them. Henry, William, Hope. My reasons to fight, my reasons to survive, my reasons to believe that even in the darkest moments, there is always a way out. There is always hope. Always.